Greetings, Earthling! Welcome back to another little taste of beer today. Today we got the Einbeck Urbock Dark. Let me tell you something about what Martin Luther preferred to drink. 99 theses and a beer, so to speak, and how a city invented the bock. When you think about bock beer, you usually think of Bavaria and southern Germany. But back then, it all started in a totally different place. From the high Middle Ages of the Hanseatic League, which you might have heard of in Europe, up to the 30 Years' War in Germany, northern Germany was the center of the European art of brewing. And everyone needed beer. I mean, like, water wasn't usually that drinkable. You became sick of it. And so people started using beer for drinking. Just every day, about 1 to 2 liters per day. So it all starts in Einbeck, which nowadays is a small town with about 30,000 inhabitants and many, many half-timbered houses, which you probably have seen in Germany before. Only a few people have actually been to Einbeck, I guess. I'm one of them. But many have heard of it, and some even have been drinking beer from them. At the time of the Hanseatic League, Einbeck was not only part of this big and powerful, merchants' league, but it also was their beer supplier. In 1240, the small town became officially a city. It received the city rights. Usually you got those from a king or a duke or whatever. And with the city rights, there came certain privileges. In this specific case, the right to brew beer. And it was brewed. So they started brewing in Einbeck. And the half-timbered houses they got there still bear witness to this today. You see the high entrance gate and a roof. And the high roof area was for storing the hops. And the high gates were for the brewing tanks, which they brought from house to house. And so these are the hallmarks, basically, of brewing houses nowadays, which they had 700 at around 1600. They had 700 brewing houses, while they had about 7,000 inhabitants. So basically, everybody in this city was into brewing beer. And the beer of Einbeck became a total luxury good. It was exported to the whole Hanseatic League, the Baltic Sea area, whole of Germany, and in all of Europe, basically. It was even exported to Bavaria, where they have been buying and drinking it, and even to Italy. But, if you have beer going that long way, it probably gets bad. So what they did is, in order to survive a long distance, the beer had to be brewed differently. For the mash, a little less water, and an unusually high gravity. Back in the day, beer was very thin. Was basically not even half of that would what in comparison, maybe half of a Budweiser, maybe, and that is a light beer already. So it was really light. But the result of that was a heavy alcoholic beer, which survived the long travel. And this beer became a model for success. Actually, we have a document from 1378, which is the earliest documented appearance of Einbeck, much more the beer. And this document is a beer bill. So it's a damn old beer bill, basically. To drink Einbecker beer was a totally status symbol. Like in the late medieval cities of the Hanseatic region, there were some insanely rich people back then for the time. And for them, it was like having a large house, having elegant clothes, having huge horses, riding out every day and drinking Einbecker. That actually medievalist Steffen Selzer from Hamburg tells us so. So basically, it was the drink of the rich and famous. And the beer had some basic form. If you have a look at the little E on all the barrels, they had a golden E on it. So they had a very early form of branding. So everybody knew, oh, this is Einbecker beer. This is really good and really, really expensive. You see, and it created scenes nowadays we only know from in front of Apple stores, maybe. Back in 1446, there was an uprising in a big town called Braunschweig. The citizens threatened to break into the Ratskeller and smash every barrel that they could find of the city lords. If those city lords, which made the prices for Einbecker beer in their city, weren't selling Einbecker cheaply, so everyone could afford it. So they had a real riot there because of the beer. Sell it cheaper or we bust everything. And Martin Luther, the great reformer, the religious reformer, actually once said, the best drink that anyone knows is called Einbecker beer. And Martin Luther, as he got married, had the beer delivered by the keg to his wedding, so everybody could drink it there. In Munich, you see, they had delivered Einbeck there, starting about 1555. But around about 20 years later, they realized, hey, we can do that ourselves. And they started having their own Hofbräu house, which you might have heard in Munich. This is the origin, which started in 1589, the Hofbräuhaus in Munich. But the beer wasn't quite Einbecker. So what then happened is sort of early medieval New Age spy story. In 1614, they hired a master brewer called Elias Pichler. And he was lured to the Hofbräuhaus, and he was supposed to brew this Einbeck or Einpöckisch, what they called it, beer in Munich. It's never quite clear if this Elias was really from Einbeck and if he really had the original recipe, or if he just rebrewed it from like tasting and trying till it had the same taste. Because back then they were full-time brewers in Einbeck, but they were city officials that were sworn in, and they were sworn in on their life. Something that back then nobody took, too lightly. If you had sworn on your life, you would be killed if you broke the oath. So it's not quite clear if it was really Einbeck brewmaster, or if he just made it from himself from scratch. However, in Bavaria, it happened what happens to beer. It got drunk, and people back there couldn't say, and nowadays they can't say it either, Einbeck or Einpöckisch, so they called it Ohrenburg or whatever. And after a time, it suddenly became the Bock beer. And that's how Bock beer started. And then Einbeck basically is the original Bock beer. It all started back there in a small town in northern Germany. You see, most people say that Bock beer back then was a top fermented beer. I actually don't believe that, for two simple reasons. Brewing was allowed in the winter half year. So they started in November and finished, when spring came. And as you know, top fermented beer is brewed at about 15 degrees, but bottom fermented beer is brewed at about 5 degrees. So they could have been brewing beer, in spring or fall, because 15 degrees is easy at that time. So it probably might have been a bottom fermented beer. And also bottom fermented beer, if you brew it right, like we know from lager or export, is especially brewed for that, exporting requirement. So we will never know probably. But however, let's have a beer. That's what we're here for, right? So as you can see, it doesn't have that much foam. It's the citric acid, as you call it. Okay, I'm working on that part of my English. So the color is amber, as you can see. I would have expected for it to be much darker. I mean, Einbeck nowadays has a couple of different bocks. It's the home of the Bock. What can you do about it? So they have a couple of different box. So as it gets colder outside, people stay in. They like darker and more tastier beer. So no reason not to drink a bock. The smell is a little nutty. It's malty, and if you drink it, it's malty, it's roasty, naturally with a malt taste. I mean, like, that's what it all is about. And it's sweet. Usually bock beers are a little sweeter than original beers. With 6.2 degrees gravity, Pils usually has about 14, and 6.5% alcohol. It's something you might want to consider not drinking too many at one time. However, it is a little sweet, but it gets really bitter in the end. So it leads a little light bitter aftertaste. And it's not, if you think about the Helle or something, that's what we call süffig. It's light and lightly sweet and you can drink it all day. It's not like that. It's much too heavy for that. As I said, the carbonic acid is not much, so the foam, the head is head is gone, but you can drink it quite quickly. But you want to be careful on that one. If you want my little piece on advice about the temperature of the beer, I know that in the US all the major beers are drunk at a very low temperature, so you don't have any of the taste, which usually is not good. But if you're into craft beer, you know that beer doesn't have to be ice cold all the time. So usually, as a rule of thumb, I would say have a look at the degree of the alcohol. And it should be not lower in degrees Celsius than the degree of alcohol. Okay, if it's 6.5, don't drink it lower than 6.5 degrees Celsius, as a rule of thumb. Usually heavier beers have more taste, so you can drink them warmer. That's basically the message. So, if you want my opinion, a thumbs up for the dark Bock, the Urbock, dunkel. The Urbock in German, the Ur is the original Bock, so it, like indicates some sort of original recipe or something. It's thumbs ups for the beer. And on a scale from 1 to 5, I would probably give it a 2.5 because it gets really bitter at the end. And you're probably not going to drink too many of those. However, I'm going to drink this one. You have a good day. Bye-bye.